Africa, where the estate shape, thought time death, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. Today I have much so yeah, foundation as well as culture pro, no other than Miss Linda Carlisle.
Hi, how you doing?
Welcome, Miss Linda on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce me more about yourself that I miss?
You bet. My name's Linda Carlisle. My business, as you see on the screen, is ComEXT, and I really think of myself as an extension of the leadership team in whatever company I'm working with. And I'm providing a communications extension of that leadership team. Maybe they have a communications department, but usually they don't. I support mid-sized businesses, and I usually am supporting these businesses through times of really significant change. It may be that they have new leadership, or they're undergoing a new strategy launch, or perhaps they're going through a merger or an acquisition where there are two companies coming together. And I help with that transition by helping people stay more informed, more connected, less fearful about what's going on, helping people stay aware of what the changes ahead of them are going to be, and what the reasoning for that is, and then helping people just feel more excited about what the future looks like. And I do that by helping leaders understand a little bit more about what their people need from them in those moments of change, but then also helping to craft those communications and coach the leaders through how to communicate it effectively with their teams during times of disruptive change.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Linda. Thank you. And tell us new co-cultures or inspire, engage, mentally distinguish a new co-culture from a traditional corporate cultures. Is it a set of values, operating principles, or completely different mindset?
So usually when I talk about NewCo, what I'm thinking about there is one company acquiring another company, and then what you usually have are two different cultures. And I think a lot of times during an acquisition, the leadership teams get so excited about doing that acquisition. They see the future, the vision of what's possible is out ahead of them, and they're fairly I'd say optimistic about how similar the cultures are. But in reality, it's very unlikely that the two companies working completely separate from each other actually do have identical cultures. And so you have this opportunity during that moment of change when one company's acquired another, instead of just saying shove it through and hope for the best, really looking at each culture and saying, what do we love about this culture, and what do we love about this culture, and what would we rather get rid of in these two cultures? And then are there any behaviors, 'cause culture is behavior based, are there any behaviors we need to add to the mix to be more effective in the future? And really purposefully building that culture design, maybe getting some input from the two teams. What do they love and what do they hate about the culture? So that you're building this culture of the future, which I call the new co-culture, which is the new co is those two companies combining, and now it's a new company, and it has an opportunity to have a new co-culture that is designed for the future they envision together.
Interesting, Miss Linda. And why is inspiration now critical business metric alongside engagement? How does an inspired workforce differ from a merely satisfied or productive one?
Those terms are classic terms in this space, but I will be honest with you. Right now, we are looking at in the United States like I would call it an epidemic of disengagement, an epidemic of dissatisfied workforces, and I think that that comes from, many years after years after years of workforces being right sized based on quarterly revenue numbers and things like that. People just aren't feeling that they're valued, that they're that their future is tightly tied to the company that they're with, that they're going to be invested in, that they're going to be informed, that there's a statistical distrust of leadership, and that's because leaders are not transparent and communicative, and not thinking about the impact of their actions upon their people all the time. And it's not like you need to be kowtowed to the whims of the employees, but just really to treat the employee, the workforce, with the humanity of, how would you feel if you were on the receiving end of not knowing what tomorrow was going to look like within your company? And so, I think the first step is to get from that, I'm really not thinking about it all, to just being a much more empathetic leader where you're thinking about the impact of whatever change you're bringing to the organization, thinking about the pace of change that your team has been experiencing, right? Hey, when you have a new ERP, now we're going to reorganize. Now we're going to, bring AI into the organization. Now we're going to reorganize again. How quickly are you putting people through these changes? And how would you feel if you were on the receiving end of that? And then acting accordingly so that your people start to feel informed, safe, trustful, all those things. What we know about high performance in the business world is that at a very baseline, trust is the baseline. You have to trust each other. You have to trust your leader. You have to trust you're going to have each other's back. That what you're hearing is actually all the facts that you need to be successful. And so I think that communication is at the very center of building that trust.
In the new culture, whose does ultimate accountability lie from scientific role or in leadership with every or with source system?
So ultimately, I think building a new culture is, it's kind of everybody's responsibility. That's why I'm a big fan of bringing the employees into the mix and getting their opinions about where what they think the culture should be as well, because culture is real. I mentioned earlier, culture is based on behaviors. Culture is how we treat each other. And so I tend to think of it in three columns. How do we treat each other? Those behaviors that are about how we treat each other, those behaviors that are about how we envision the future, and then those behaviors that are about how we get work done. And so, in the how we treat each other, do we treat each other with empathy? Are we kind to each other? Do we look out for each other? Do we have each other's back? Are we collaborative, or do we hoard information? Right. So those how we treat each other behaviors, and that sense of whether or not my team has my back and I can rely on them when the chips are down, and they're going to make sure that I am successful, and that, if I make a mistake, they've got my back on it. Or if I'm overburdened at a particular time and somebody sees it, they can come and lean in and help. And those kinds of behaviors around trust and building a tight team and really liking each other and liking how you interact with each other, those things build the trust element of and the caring part of a culture. And you could see how that's everybody from senior leadership to my immediate supervisor to my peers. So everyone has a stake in building that trust-based culture. And then, in terms of, say, for instance, innovation, say you want to have innovation be part of your organization, it's up to leadership to make sure that you've created a safe place for people to experiment. Because if I'm going to get docked in some way for making a mistake, I'm not going to take any chances. I'm not going to try anything new. And if I don't try anything new, I'm not going to innovate. And so, it's leaders making sure that the environment is safe, and it's team members taking those chances and trying new things and trying to innovate. So you can see how there are, roles for everyone in the organization when it comes to creating the culture. Daniel?
Hello, Miss. My apologies, Miss Linda. Something wrong with our connection, or something wrong with our
Is it on my
studio.
end or is it your end?
So let's go to the next question. I think it's my end. You are not disconnected. But whatever it is, I want to answer. So my next question is: how does culture approach transparency in a way that builds trust instead of anxiety? What information is shared and how?
It really depends on the situation at hand, but I think, what you want is if there is anything that could be threatening the well being of your team, whether it's, if you're facing a financial difficulties as an organization, do they trust that you're telling them what's going on? And if you've got a layoff, are you being transparent with them about what the financial reasons for that were? And are you giving them a sense of whether the worst of it's over or if there's more to come? Are you treating people well when you do need to do something like a reorganization or a layoff? Are you helping the people as they leave so that they feel supported? And are you telling your people that how you've helped people as they've exited the company? And are you helping your people who are remaining understand why did this happen? And are we on the other side of it? And so I just think there's a lot around transparency that is that speaks very directly to the well-being of the people. And if you're not tuned into the fact that the things that are going on in the company are affecting people's well-being and then communicating transparently into that, I think you've got people working on different planes entirely, right? And you're not answering the things that people need to hear in order to move forward effectively.
Miss Linda, let's talk about on leadership and empowerment. What does leadership look like in a co-culture? How do you model?
So when it comes to empowerment, I think people, again, I think one of the things that people want out of their job experience these days is to have a sense of they're valued, they're being invested in order for them to reach the levels of success that they hope to reach, and that they're being expected of them. So they're recognized, they're valued, and they're allowed to rise to their own highest potential. And in order to do that, I think you really need to be the kind of leader who is empowering your people to be their best selves. You're investing in them so that they're growing, and then you're giving them the runway to take off and fly and thrive within their role. And so empowerment is definitely one of the elements that we look at when we talk about high performance teams.
Empowerment and effective ways
Daniel,
to
I'm not getting your whole question. I'm sorry. It's breaking up.
yes, we have a glitches, people. We want to apologize because our studio is experiencing glitches. What are the effective ways to give employees a real autonomy and ownership over they work without descending into chaos?
Well, I think one way to
Miss Linda,
provide
can you
autonomy.
hear me now?
I heard, I think, enough of that question to
Oh no.
move
Can you
forward with it.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, when you talk about empowerment, autonomy, and how do you allow those things to happen without creating, I think what you were saying, without creating chaos, is you obviously don't want everyone flying off in whatever direction. I think it's very important. I talk a lot about strategy alignment. And so one of the things that a thriving business needs to do is to have a very clear strategy of what they're going, where they're going, what their priorities are, what's the win-win, what's in it for me, for everyone, what does success look like as we go forward. And then each individual function then can go in and say, if this is the strategy and these are the priorities, then these are the things that our function needs to do in order to help our organization thrive and grow, right? And so that transparency at the front end around strategy and where we're going leads to brainstorming and ideation at the functional level. How do we contribute to making that vision a reality? And then from there, each individual person has a much clearer sense of, okay, then this is how my job goes, and then I'm empowered to go do my job in pursuit of that vision for my function, in pursuit of that strategy for my company. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, Miss Linda. So, in a competitive market, how does a strong culture become a sustainable competitive advantage for hiring,
Yeah.
retention, and innovation?
Yeah, so you're talking about the employment brand. No, and I'm going to go back. Strong culture and is it a competitive advantage? I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about the epidemic of disengagement. Right? I think there's only maybe 30% of the American workforce that considers itself engaged. Everyone else is disengaged, which means they are checked out. I want to say that the number was 17% of the overall workforce that is actively disengaged, which means they're coming to work every day and sharing their grievances and unhappiness with the company. So across the US, only maybe a little less than a third, 30% of the American workforce is engaged. So if you are lucky enough to have a company that is a high engagement workforce that you're sharing transparently, you're investing in your people, you're giving them opportunities to grow, um, you've got a purpose that they believe in, all of the things that they're empowered, they feel like their ideas and their actions matter. Those are the things that contribute to people feeling engaged. And when they feel engaged, they're going to invest more of their discretionary effort. That in turn makes your organization much more successful. But it also helps build this reputation for what kind of an employer you are. It becomes evident on Glassdoor. The difference between a highly rated employer on Glassdoor versus a poorly rated organization on Glassdoor. That's the visibility of your employment brand. Word gets around, and people want to work at those high engagement organizations where people thrive and feel excited to come to work each day, and that they really care about their coworkers and feel cared about in turn. And so that culture, that high performance culture, it turns into your employment brand, and that in turn helps you attract and retain the very top talent.
Miss Linda, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 fourth season, science 101, sex 101 in its second season, and my baby podcast, law 101, mental health 101, and Bible verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Linda, looking forward, what is the next frontier of workplace culture?
I think that right now we're facing a period of time where a lot of employers, um, there's almost this move away from being empathetic that you sort of see hitting the headlines these days. And I think what's going to happen with those organizations that are being less sensitive to the needs of the employees, you're going to start to see their hiring and attraction power recede. And that over time, the organizations that are leading with empathy and caring about their people, are those organizations are going to take over, in fact, and really start to be the ones that are visible and attracting the top people. So that to me is where you need to be.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Linda. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now? Miss Linda, can you please invite our listeners?
Uh, you can view my website on www.com-ext.com, and you can follow me on LinkedIn. And I'm sure that you can put those things in the show notes.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Linda because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering culture will rise. So, Miss Linda, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you. It's a good call. Thank you.
Monica, people, see you soon.